Welcome back to another episode of the Pax What She Said podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Maggie Loney, joined as always by Perry Goldstein, previewing arguably one of the most electric games we're going to see all season. Packers-Lions rematch. The Lions sitting at 11-1, the Packers at 9-3, heading to Ford Field for Thursday Night Football after both teams won on Thanksgiving. Packers still kind of somehow in it for the number one seed, but, highly unlikely. I think at least winning the division is more probable at this point. But regardless, two playoff teams at this point. Nothing is going to change about that, really. Two playoff teams that could see each other a third time. So we'll see how the second one goes.
I know. I mean, in order for the Packers to get anywhere near the division title and or the number one seed, they need to win this game. Right? This is the game where they need to prove that they can go toe-to-toe against the Lions, because the Lions is everyone's favorite for the Super Bowl. The Lions are everyone's number one in the power rankings right now. Like, they are the NFL darlings of the season, rightfully so. They've won 10 in a row. They look mighty as hell. They're putting up insane points against their opponents. So I would like to think that the Packers are going to be a formidable matchup against this Lions team, more so than the first time they saw each other, which we're going to dive into why this matchup is different. But in general, for the Packers, this is a huge, huge win and could shape their entire postseason.
Yeah, and I mean, just the Vikings too. Like, I don't mean to keep leaving out the Vikings. They obviously beat the Packers once this year, have a better record than the Packers as it stands. But this division is going to come down to the wire for all of the playoff spots. Three really strong football teams, obviously. No other division has two teams with 9 wins, and yet we have the NFC North with 3 teams with 9+ wins. And looking at, how this season is going to kind of finish the regular season, the Lions down the stretch play teams that have a 38-22 record. Vikings finish against teams with 37-23 record, and the Packers finish with teams with a 36-24 record. So they're all playing really good teams, partially because they're all playing each other at least one more time. But just, it's going to be like a knockout to get through these final 5 weeks.
Yeah. And I certainly don't mean to leave out the Vikings either, just to be clear. I mainly mentioned this game because it's the one right ahead of us.
Right.
I fully agree that, like, when we get to the Vikings game, it's also going to be a huge game. I think whoever wins that one will end up second in the division at this point, unless something
probably 5th seed. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless something huge happens. But for the Lions, I mean, I don't want to look too far ahead. Obviously, we want to talk about this matchup, but in general, for them, they do, to your point, because you brought it up, have a really tough schedule. They have the Bills, the 49ers, who I know don't look like the 49ers, but I think at any point the 49ers can be themselves and make, a game really difficult. And then, like we said, they play the Vikings again. That's their last game of the season in Week 18. So the Packers need some help from other teams to beat the Lions in order for things to go in their favor in that way. But first step, like we just said, is for them to just go in on Thursday night and beat them in Ford Field. Now, I have a question before we dive in, actually.
Okay.
This is ad-libbing, so I'm sorry to go off of our script so early. But everyone is talking about how Ford Field is this horrible place to go play this year, that nobody wants to go. It's the hardest place to win in football. Do we feel like that's a little overblown?
I mean, I think part of it is the way that the stadium is set up. Like, it's a dome, so it's already like the noise is reverberating. And unfortunately, the Lions haven't had a lot to cheer for. So I think they are probably showing up and they're being louder. And, like, I think just the atmosphere in general going into a team that is that hot, the atmosphere is a little bit better than, like, going to Lambeau in the 80s when the Packers were not a very good football team. Even if it was cold, like, you don't really have a home field advantage when your team is not performing very well. So I think that is part of it. But I don't necessarily know if I would call it like the hardest place today to play. I think the Bills kind of earned that title on Sunday Night Football with the feet of snow that came down.
I just don't know how I feel about calling home, period, the hardest place to play. But what do I know?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be tough. I think Tucker Kraft kind of said it. The Lions
Yeah.
are like a thorn in their side right now. And that is unfortunately part of it. Going in there, it's going to be noisy and they have a lot to play for and they have a lot of momentum. But the Packers did it last year on Thanksgiving, like they can certainly quiet down this Lions team. But I do really quick before we talk about the injuries, think it's really interesting when we look at like these teams combined have 6 losses all season, the Vikings, the Lions, and the Packers, and 3 of them are against each other. Like each team has only lost one time to a team that's not in the division or, in the Lions case once period, but just really bananas to think about this being potentially a playoff seeding kind of game. But let's talk about
Mhm.
why these are so different than the first time around. And I think maybe injuries is probably the place to start. First matchup, of course, Packers hosted at Lambeau Field. Jordan Love had the groin injury that he suffered the week prior. We weren't even sure if he was going to be able to play. So that made things challenging. Jair Alexander and Evan Williams didn't play in the secondary. Josh Myers was out. So the offensive line looked different without their starting center. For the Lions, Aiden Hutchinson was out, and it gets really, honestly worse for them probably this time around because he's still out and they have a ton more injuries. But let's talk about, I guess, the Packers first and how this one is different now that everybody's presumably healthy going into this one.
Well, it just makes it much more even. I think when you go into a game like this matchup, you want to be at your full strength. And the injury report came out. You know, there's obviously it's still long. It's late in the season. You're going to have a long injury report, but it's more likely. Well, 1A is that Jordan Love is fully healthy, so that already puts you at a better advantage than the last time. You have your full offensive line healthy as well. And you're likely going to have at least Evan Williams, and if not Jair back for this matchup as well. So if you do have Jair back more specifically, it's just a complete game changer. And there are other pieces of this matchup that we'll get to non-injury related that I think make the Packers a better matchup than last time. But period, having your best cornerback out there is enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's a field tilting kind of perspective to have him come back out there. And the Packers secondary has played better, obviously, in recent weeks, but you can't make up for having a guy like Jair out there. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, fortunately, I guess if you're the Packers, the Lions, it just gets worse for them, right? They were without Aiden Hutchinson last time, and then Malcolm Rodriguez and Josh Pascal were out as well. And their pass rush looks worse now, unfortunately for them. I mean, they're just dealing with a ton of injuries. Obviously, uh, Malcolm Rodriguez was just placed on injured reserve with a torn ACL. Linebacker Derek Barnes is out with a knee injury. Alex Anzalone has a broken forearm. Makai
Mhm.
Wingo suffered a knee injury against the Bears on Thanksgiving. He is on IR now. Um, DJ Reader is on the injury report. Josh Pascal and Levi Onwuzurike both suffered injuries last week, and Dan Campbell kind of said, like, I'm not really optimistic about either of them playing on Thursday
Yeah.
night. So when you look at like who is healthy for that front, it's maybe like Aleem McNeil. Yeah, like I think he's probably the only defensive player that is fully healthy in that front seven, and I guess Darius Smith, who we can talk about here in a little bit, is a new addition. But yeah, tough injuries for that Lions team. Basically, a new front seven.
Yeah, I mean, it's an entirely new, uh, front. I don't think it bodes well. I mean, both these teams have 2 of the best offensive lines in the league. They protect their quarterbacks extremely well. So if you're going to try to find a weak point, um, on the line, it's gonna be a tough day for you, and to not have a your top how many was that? 4? 5?
At
6
least.
defensive linemen, um, against this Packers offensive line, who, by the way, we never really talk about because they just play so solidly, uh, is gonna be a really tough day, and Jordan Love, when pressured, unfortunately, versus Jordan Love when he has a clean pocket, is a different quarterback. So if the Packers can keep him upright and let him go through his reads, keep his footing steady, he's, I think, going to be able to do whatever he wants. And I think more importantly, too, is that without those D linemen, you're probably going to see some pretty huge holes for Josh Jacobs to run through.
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of flip that a little bit, Taylor Decker is a DNP
Yes.
as well, their left tackle, which is huge. The Packers edge rush has come on the last couple weeks, 5 sacks against the Dolphins, and obviously the Lions offensive line is one of the best in football. Penei Sewell is absolutely incredible. But if Taylor Decker can't play, and it sounds like he is going to be a true game time decision on
Mhm.
Thursday night, that potentially opens up another opportunity for the Packers edge rush. But yeah, Zach Tom, I think, we never talk about the Packers offensive line, but he's graded. I know PFF isn't the gospel, but he's, I think, like fourth in the league at, or no, he's seventh. Taylor Decker's fourth, but yeah, he's seventh amongst all tackles in the NFL using PFF metrics. So just having such a reliable, steady season and could be needed against a guy like Zadarius Smith, who just seems to consistently hang around the NFC North.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the flip side of this, because that was exactly where my brain was going. Because if you're looking at how depleted the Lions pass rush is, it's hard not to compare it to the opposite trajectory that the Packers
Mhm.
pass rush has been having over the course of this season. And, when the Packers first went up against Jared Goff, one of the things that we made sure to mention was how good Goff has been under pressure and how good he's been against the blitz. But that has changed a little bit since that. We've seen a weakness, sorry, can't speak. We've seen his weakness when pressured. We've seen him have a game where he had 5 turnovers. He is not invincible, and the last few weeks, especially against the Bears made the Packers look this way too, but made them also look not indestructible. So I think if this pass rush can get home in any way like they could against the Dolphins, it's going to make the Lions' day that much more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that also goes into Jordan Love being fully healthy. We talked about after the Lions game, like he wasn't himself. He wasn't stepping into his throws. He didn't have kind of the scramble ability to protect himself or evade the pass rush. And I don't think the Lions registered a single sack in that first meetup, which is really surprising because the Packers were, of course, playing without Josh Myers. So they were just like a reconfigured offensive line at that point. But yeah, this one is going to look different, especially having a healthy Jordan Love. So maybe let's flip it and talk about some of the guys that are continuing to just have stellar performances. We talked about the depleted Lions front seven, but that secondary is one of the best in the NFL. I don't think Brian Branch is going to get ejected a second time, so he should be available
Not
the whole game. Kirby Joseph is tied with Xavier McKinney for the league lead with 7 picks. He obviously had the pick 6 against Jordan Love in that first meetup. Sounds like Carlton Davis, even though he's on the injury report with a knee, probably is able to play this week. And then Emmanuel Mosley is also likely to play. He was a full participant this week. So should be a secondary at pretty much full strength for Jordan this time around.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, you said it. They're one of the best in the league. They play fast, they play strong, they play aggressive. They're going to man up. They're going to be a huge test for this offense, and they're going to be a huge test for Jordan, who has the last few weeks had a turnover-free game. I think that if Jordan can go up against this secondary and keep control and possession of the ball while he is on offense, the Packers have a very good chance in this one. The Lions are going to want to and try to steal one again, and that could be the game.
Yeah, and I mean, I think on the flip side of that too, the Lions defense is in a really interesting spot because they had been taking the ball away a ton like the Packers, and then these last couple weeks now against the Colts and against the Bears, they haven't generated a turnover on defense. So, knowing that the Packers have not given one up on offense, it's imperative that they go in there and they play really clean football and they don't let the Lions steal one and get that momentum back rolling because I know we talked about, the Packers struggled against the Bears and what that might have meant. The Lions have looked beatable the last couple weeks, and we said that coming out of the Lions game. That's why the first matchup was so frustrating is Neither team was at full strength, but the Packers had every opportunity to put that game away and get back into it. And they just, too many missed opportunities. So that's why this one is going to be really important because the Bears almost did it. We saw that the Lions are a beatable football team. It just is going to take a team to actually do it. And I think the Packers have every opportunity to do that on Thursday night.
I agree. I mean, the Packers, with the way that they've been playing, um, can put the gas pedal on and take it to this team. I actually think, like I mentioned before, the weakness, especially in the front, and what the Packers are doing so well now, which is running the ball, is probably, in my mind, the key to this game. Being able to just play like really gritty, um, pound the ball football, hold the time of possession, not give the offense opportunities to even score, could mean, yeah, could mean that they win. I don't see a world. I mean, we can talk about the Packers defense against this offense, but I it's it's going to be less to me about the way this Packers offense plays. Like, I think they're going to be able to move the ball against this Lions team and do it effectively. I think it's going to be more about like mitigating how explosive the Lions offense is.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm curious your thoughts on this actually. So maybe let's switch to that. Talking about how this Packers team, or yeah, can beat this Lions team. I know we were frustrated by it in the moment, but if the Packers play the same exact brand of football that they played against the Dolphins, and I think this is a game coming in a really good time because we've said for 2 consecutive weeks they've played their best game of the season. So they're continuing to stack and build momentum and get better. If the Packers play dink and dunk with the Lions and let them take chunks down the field, is that enough to win the game on Thursday night? The same way the Dolphins would get like 9 yards, 8 yards, 13 yards, and just, kind of keep things going. Do you think the Packers win that game? Or do you think they have to get a turnover or a three and out and just like quick stops?
It's a good question. I don't know if you have the Lions red zone stats in front of you. I feel like just off the eye test, they're probably one of the best offenses in the red zone. So to me, like, the dink and dunk only works if you're able to hold in the red zone, right? And if the Packers can do that, if they can hold this Lions team to field goals, then sure, drain the clock, let Jared Goff get as many yards as he wants, let David Montgomery run, 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 run. But if you're not turning it to 7, by all means. I just don't see that being a reliable strategy against the Lions because they are so automatic when it comes to scoring touchdowns. So to me, I'm thinking get off that field as quickly as possible, play aggressive, try to get a turnover or two, but like 3 and out. I don't want to see a dink and dunk because I don't see the bend don't break. Oh, look, they didn't break. The Lions will break you.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I don't think that kind of football would work against this Lions team. I do have the numbers in front of me. They are second in red zone defense, first in third down defense, and then on the offensive side of the ball, they're fourth in third down offense and sixth in red zone offense. So yes, putting up a ton of points, sustaining drives. I think the Packers have to steal something, and I think their defense is fully capable of doing that. But we've seen them go after the football a lot more in these last couple weeks, generating fumbles. And I don't know if any of that had to do with like the cold weather. Obviously, they're playing in a dome, so that isn't necessarily a factor. But it's a really good football team in all three phases, and the Packers know that going in. And if you want to make a deep playoff push, and we think this team is capable of doing that, these are the kind of football teams you're going to see again. So it's a really good litmus test.
Yeah. I don't know if this is not heavy analysis or anything groundbreaking, but these are two very good football teams going head to head who are going to play very tough and very angry against one another. The Packers are going to have to keep their cool. This is going to get very chippy. These teams hate each other. Um, and if you have to play the cleanest, crispest game of your season. Like, that to me, is 1A, like if I'm Matt LaFleur and I'm reiterating all week, like what we need to do is control the football. Do not, no fumble. We can't give them one. If you give the Lions one, especially the Lions this season, like they will turn it into 7. And then you can find yourself in a hole that you don't want to be in, which we saw in their first matchup, right? With that just awful pick 6. So you play clean ball, you try to take one away from them, you can get away from this. They're much more evenly matched now, and I believe the Packers can walk away with a win, but not if they play sloppy.
Yeah, so let's shift then and talk about final thoughts and a score prediction for this one. We talked about the ways that the Packers can win. So I guess the question is, do they? And I want to just say really quickly too, the comment section on this video on YouTube for the first matchup was incredible. Lots of Lions fans found the show, had a really fun dialogue talking about the NFC North. It's a really hot division this year, obviously. Loved to read through those comments. Stick around, like let's have the conversation again. I'm curious how people's thoughts have changed between these two matchups, because it's going to be a really good one on Thursday night, and I think it's going to tell us a lot about where the Packers are at, and how beatable this Lions team is, and it could shape the playoff picture. The Eagles are still right in there, obviously in contention for the first or second seed. They look like a really, really good football team, just beat the Ravens. So yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be fun down the stretch.
Yeah, well, I mean, they also have Jameson Williams this time around, which they didn't
Hmm.
have first time around. So while you have Amon Ra and you have Sam Laporta and you've got both backs, now you also have to contend with Jameson Williams. And I am hoping and praying that Jair can go on Thursday. That is all I have. That is my final thought. No, I mean, to your point too about the Lions fans in the comments. There's you and I have a ton of respect, right, for the franchise. They've been around for forever, for this team, for what Dan Campbell's been able to do. These matchups are fun. Like I love having an actual formidable opponent within the division. I'm excited for this game. I think it's going to be. It could be like one of those games we look back on, at least at the end of the season, if not, further down the line, and say, "Oh, remember that Thursday night game and what happened afterwards." So um, but I would like to see the Packers walk away with the win.
So, do you think they do?
Part of me, look, Lions win, no surprise. This team is incredible. They are, Super Bowl favorites for a reason. They're on a 10-game win streak. Sure. There's something about the trajectory that the Packers are on at the moment and putting it all together at the right time that makes me feel like they can walk into Ford Field and come away with a win. Do I think they're going to beat down on the Lions like we saw last year on Thanksgiving? Absolutely not. This is going to be a close game. This is going to come down to probably a field goal or a ball bouncing on one way or a last minute, 2-minute drive for the win. Like this will be a very evenly matched game. Um, Only if the Packers play perfectly, basically.
Yeah, I think where I'm going with this one, it has a lot to do with injuries. And I think the Packers are just catching the Lions at, unfortunately for the Lions, a really tough time where they don't have a lot of firepower that they had. And what's so interesting about this is on Pack a Day, we previewed all of these matchups in God, probably June. And one of the things we talked about for the Lions team was that they're a very, very talented football team, but the depth is not there. And if they start to get injured, you could see that derail their season. And they've done a really good job up to this point, but there's so many bodies down. And the replacements that they found have been really good
Mhm.
replacements, but now the replacements are getting hurt. And that's just a really hard way to live in the NFL. And we see it with the Niners. There's some teams that just have bad injury luck. And unfortunately for the Lions, a lot of these aren't like 1 week injuries. It's season ending at this point of the season. So I don't know. I feel like to me, and maybe it's the homer in me, you can tell me in the comments. I see this one being like 34-31. And I want the Packers to be on the winning side of a field goal. And I think it's going to be like, it's 31-28, and then they tie it up. And then, the Packers get the ball and there's like 45 seconds left and they trot down. And it's going to me, it feels like whoever has the ball last kicks a winning field goal.
I agree with you. High scoring also, I agree. But we will see. We will see.
Yeah, this is going to be a really, really good game. Let us know in the comments your score prediction, how you feel about the division, who you think the playoff teams are going to be, because things are starting to shake out around the NFL. We have teams getting eliminated. We have teams clinching playoff spots, clinching divisions already. This is when things start to heat up. And if you play fantasy football, your playoffs are probably starting as well here pretty soon. But thank you, as always, for listening to the show. We'll be back probably on Friday or Saturday to talk about what we hope is another Packers win. And then we have a long break before Sunday Night Football against the Seahawks. So enjoy this one. There aren't too many regular season games left. You can find Twitter and on Blue Sky at Pax What She Said and at PWSS Podcast. On YouTube at Pax What She Said. You can find Perry at Perry_Goldstein, me at Maggie J. Loney. And we'll be back. Enjoy this one and go Pack Go.
And we're on TikTok.
Oh God, yeah. That's all you.
We're on TikTok. Follow us on TikTok. I made a TikTok. It's fun
so
and entertaining and funny. So follow us on TikTok. Pax What She Said.
Woo. I feel so old when you talk about TikTok. But yes, follow us on TikTok as well.
We are old, but we are trying.
We are old dogs learning new tricks for you. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the game on Thursday and go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.